Secrets, they say, are revealed only at life's twilight, like echoes from the soul's deepest recesses. These aren't mere rumors or fleeting conjectures, nor sensational headlines born from media frenzy. This is a genuine confession, spoken in a hushed voice, with eyes barely open through the weight of emotion and weariness, brimming with tears. Pope Francis, surrounded by a silence that seemed to vibrate with tension, uttered words that shook even the most skeptical. Jesus was different, not as many imagine him. He was more, immeasurably more. At that moment, the Pope fell silent, as if carrying centuries of spiritual burden on his fragile shoulders, as if what he was about to say could not be contained or explained by any ecumenical synod in history. Why did he say this? What did the Pope know that the rest of the world didn't? Was it due to fear, indifference, or an inability to see beyond? Imagine the echo of that phrase, lost in the dim light of a room, the fragile sound of ragged breathing, the faint creak of a crucifix in a trembling hand, the deep tremor of long suppressed truth, guarded with desperate jealousy. What revelations were granted to him in his final years? What did he uncover in forgotten texts, in the most ancient prayers, in the mysterious whisper of the Spirit permeating the invisible pages of history? A secret door, sealed by centuries of fear and power, was about to be opened, a door many wished to keep shut at all costs. And what lay behind it could forever alter the perception and understanding of Jesus. Are you ready to hear what was revealed in the final moments of his life? It all began in a humble room in the Vatican, modest in its simplicity, far from the expected splendor. There were no hidden cameras, no speeches prepared for posterity, no outside witnesses, just a private, intimate conversation burdened with existential weight. A conversation never meant to become public. A young priest, a close and trusted confidant of the Pope, was the one who heard him that night. And after long hesitation, consumed by fear and responsibility, he decided to speak. Holy Father, do you believe Jesus experienced human fears? The question hung in the air like invisible incense, filling the silence with its uncertain aroma. Pope Francis, his gaze fixed on an old wooden crucifix, replied in a muffled voice, deep and full of genuine gravity. Jesus wept inwardly, far more than the Gospels describe, and not only because of the cross, but also because of us. The priest froze, caught between astonishment, reverence, and respectful fear. But the Pope continued, as if unburdening his soul of a weight he could no longer carry. I saw him in a dream, or perhaps it wasn't a dream. I felt it so real that it still pains me. Jesus looked at me and wept. What was this revelation? A prophetic vision? A divine warning? The question wasn't just whether Jesus felt physical pain, but whether his spiritual pain was infinitely deeper than we can imagine. A pain that even today resonates silently yet deafeningly in the deepest corners of the souls of those who dare to listen. That night, the Pope did not close his eyes. In his trembling hands, as if clutching a spiritual anchor, was a worn Bible, its pages creased, underlined, and stained by decades of incessant prayer and tireless searching. And among them, a passage haunted him like a persistent echo. Then he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Matthew 26:37. But these were not just ancient, cold, and distant words. They were silent cries, living torments, deep groans of suffering that seemed to still pulsate in the very fabric of history. Francis closed his eyes and felt it all again with renewed force. In this vision, Jesus was alone in Gethsemane, but there was something more. He was alone not only because of the physical absence of his disciples, sleeping and indifferent. He was alone because he bore on his shoulders the broken thoughts, unconfessed sins, and invisible wounds of all humanity. "I saw his tears," the Pope murmured, but they did not fall to the ground. They were collected by angels trembling with pain. His interlocutor barely breathed, listening to him, as if every word pierced his soul. Francis continued in an almost broken whisper, "God showed me that every tear of Jesus has a name, and one of them is mine." What did this mean? That our stories, our sins, our wounds are inscribed in his sacred tears. That Jesus not only died for us, but also with us, feeling our every loss and torment. In the days that followed, driven by an inner impulse he couldn't fully comprehend, Francis requested access to ancient Vatican texts, manuscripts forgotten for centuries in dusty basements, shrouded in the silence of fear and oblivion, gospels that had never been included in the official canon, letters from martyrs of the first centuries, prophetic visions sealed out of fear or cautious prudence. And there, amidst this silent and desperate search, he found what forever changed his view of Jesus. A fragment attributed to an anonymous disciple read, "The Master told us that ages would come when the image of the Son would be distorted, that he would be made a king, but his weeping would be forgotten." This phrase shook him like a silent and destructive earthquake. This was no heresy. It was a clear, painful, and persistent warning. Jesus did not come to be revered as an emperor on an unreachable golden throne. He came to be understood as a man broken by love for each of us, not as a distant God, but as a deeply wounded brother who embraced humanity until his last breath. In a confidential conversation with one of his closest collaborators, Pope Francis shared a profound reflection, spoken in a quiet, almost sorrowful voice. He noted that the image of Jesus often appears to us as a frozen statue, while Christ continues to be invisibly present among us, with his feet stained by the dust of roads and a heart open to compassion, ready to experience pain again and again for the love of humanity. This revelation was not a shocking statement or a provocation, but rather a sincere call to return to the true image of Jesus, to see in him not an unattainable symbol, but a Saviour who shares our sufferings, mourns our losses, and feels our wounds as his own. One night, immersed in prayer in the secluded chapel of Santa Marta, Francis suddenly knelt, not from physical ailment or weakness, but under the weight of an invisible yet palpable spiritual burden that crushed his soul. "Lord, reveal to me what is still hidden from my understanding," he whispered, barely audible. And at that moment, something occurred that is still mentioned only in confidential Vatican records. On pages marked not with ink, but with silent tears, a faint, warm, yet unsettling glow emerged. It was not a classic phenomenon described in religious books, but a living presence, an undeniable certainty beyond human explanation or description. The Pope saw Jesus, but not as a triumphant and majestic king, but as an exhausted man, bleeding, broken, yet with boundless tenderness in his gaze, piercing the soul like a silent and eternal lightning bolt. And then he heard words, addressed not to his ears but directly to his heart, like an indelible imprint. "I did not come to be understood, I came to be accompanied." Francis burst into tears, overcome with profound shock. The man representing the entire world before God felt like a helpless child in the face of such a heartbreaking revelation. He realized with painful clarity that his mission was not only to uphold established religious dogmas, but to reflect a compassionate heart that, despite all suffering, continues to love immeasurably and unconditionally. A few days later, obeying an inner impulse, Francis secretly summoned 2 cardinals he fully trusted to his private quarters. In a trembling voice, full of emotion and gravity, he shared a part of his deepest spiritual experience with them. One of the cardinals, astonished and clearly troubled, asked, "Holy Father, are you saying that Jesus continues to suffer?" The Pope, with unusual seriousness and ancient wisdom in his gaze, replied without hesitation, "Jesus did not die in the past. He is present in every suffering of the present. He invisibly walks alongside every mother who has lost her child, every young person who finds no meaning in life, every person who cries out to God in the silence of their room and receives no immediate answer." This was a vision of Jesus that did not deny or contradict accepted dogmas, but rather expanded them, presenting the Redeemer not only as a conqueror of death, but also as a silent and compassionate companion in every suffering, in every small death that a person experiences on earth. Francis did not seek revolutionary changes in church doctrine. He merely wanted to restore a living connection with the human Jesus, who looks into our eyes with infinite love and remains by our side when everyone else turns away. This was his greatest spiritual gift, expressed not in official sermons, but in intimate whispers between hearts ready to listen. The cardinals left that meeting with pale faces, shaken by what they had witnessed, something impossible to forget. One of them, trembling, left a written testimony on paper. "The Pope spoke to us as a man who no longer fears death, but fears concealing a truth too alive to be forgotten." That night, Francis did not close his eyes. He spent time reflecting on his pontificate, on every decision made with pain or hope, on every mistake and every prayer lifted to the heavens. In his heart grew the conviction that he must serve not only the institutional church, but also the living Jesus, embodied in the suffering of the forgotten. Then he ordered a personal letter to be drafted, not a solemn encyclical or a message for the general public, but a personal confession, a spiritual testament, intended to be revealed only after his death. In this letter, he wrote with a steady hand, "Jesus did not come for us to worship him with fear, but to follow him with sincere love. We have adorned his cross with glittering gold and forgotten the real pain he endured in his vulnerable flesh." Every word of this letter was an open wound, a silent plea addressed to hearts ready to listen, a call for faith not to become an empty ritual, but a living and pulsating rebirth. However, not all representatives of the Vatican readily accepted these new ideas. Some conservatively minded figures saw danger in his words, bordering on subversion. In the gilded and cold corridors, whispers circulated that he was diminishing the majestic image of the Messiah. But Francis, deeply convinced of his righteousness, refused to be intimidated or silenced. During a private mass, away from cameras and official speeches, in a humble chapel hidden from worldly bustle, he shared a reflection that shook even the most unyielding. He asked, "What if Jesus returned today and we were unable to recognize him? For we continue to await a glorious King, shining with majesty, but fail to notice the suffering brother walking beside us in the shadows." A silence so profound that it seemed as if time had stopped settled in the chapel. Some wept, unable to restrain their emotions. Others trembled, not understanding why. Still others bowed their heads, struck by a truth they had long ignored. Something new was palpable in the air, invisible yet tangible to those who could see. The Pope ceased preaching from a throne of power. He spoke not from a position of undeniable authority, but from human fragility and love. He sowed a seed that, he understood, would only sprout much later, in hearts ready to hear something more than dogmas. Shortly before his health deteriorated, Francis received a child suffering from leukemia. This brief meeting, scheduled by protocol, unexpectedly extended to an hour, transforming into a silent and profound communion. The child, with typical childlike directness, asked him, "Does Jesus' heart hurt too, like mine?" The Pope, with eyes full of tears, leaned closer and replied almost in a whisper, "Your heart and his beat together when you cry." After this meeting, an irreversible change occurred in Francis. His sermons became more poignant, filled with emotion and meaningful pauses that spoke more than words. He no longer sought applause and ovations, but sought to touch souls, striving to awaken slumbering hearts. Then came the silence, a gradual retreat, preparation for the inevitable. But even in these final days before his passing, he handed a sealed document to his secretary, his last revelation, a ray of light. "This must be known when I am no longer here. Jesus still wants to speak." In this document, he recounted a night when he dreamed of Golgotha, but in a different light than in the traditional Gospels. He envisioned a crucifixion occurring in our present day, amidst the indifference of the modern world. "I saw Jesus crucified in the middle of a city, surrounded by noise, haste, and indifference. But no one paid attention to him. Everyone was too busy with their own affairs, engrossed in their mobile phones, hypnotized by screens." Then he wrote words full of despair. Jesus was not forgotten out of ignorance. He was replaced by entertainment. A silence, thick and painful, filled the room. Was it a dream, a divine warning, or something deeper? If Jesus is among us today, are we ready to see him with new eyes, or have we forgotten how to look? The document also mentioned a secret prayer that the Pope recited every morning in solitude, away from cameras and protocols. It was not an official prayer, but a sincere conversation with the Jesus he had come to know in his visions. In it, the question echoed, "Lord, if you were to return in the flesh today, would you be recognized or crucified again?" This prayer, searing the soul, sought not comfort but truth, confronting it directly. Francis understood that Jesus did not need powerful defenders or lavish altars. He needed humble witnesses, ready to share his pain. And he, in his weakness, in his wounded humanity, became one of them, not out of power, but out of love and faithfulness. In his deathbed message, penned with a trembling yet firm hand, a clear and simple truth resonated. He asked to be remembered not as Pope, but as a man who shared the tears of others. According to him, Jesus is present much closer than commonly believed, in the very midst of daily hustle and bustle. However, he no longer manifests himself in thunderous roars or miraculous signs, but speaks in a quiet whisper, penetrating the soul, if only one is willing to listen. With deep conviction, he urged attention to this voice before the worldly noise completely deafened us. Since then, theologians, clergy, and believers from all over the world have tirelessly discussed the content of this cherished letter. It contains no scandalous revelations or provocative statements, but calls for an inner transformation. Whether it is a genuine revelation or the product of elderly frailty, when the line between worlds thins, remains a mystery to many. However, for those who knew him personally, who saw beyond the protocol, the white robe, and the papal throne, it was a moment when the Pope ceased to be an institutional figure and became something far deeper, a mirror reflecting the human soul in all its nakedness, reminding us of our wounds and hopes. His revelation was not about the end of the world with its terrifying catastrophes, but about something more urgent, forgotten compassion, lost empathy, and presence. Today, this carefully guarded letter rests in a bank vault, far from the media frenzy and hunger for sensation. Nevertheless, some fragments of it are whispered in circles of true faith, seeking not scandal, but the awakening of souls and inner rebirth. The main question that arises is not whether Jesus spoke with Francis, but whether Jesus is speaking with you now. And do you hear him? Look around. Stop. Where is the deepest pain? Whose tears go unnoticed? Whose silence is most oppressive? Where does the crushing loneliness hide? It is there that Jesus continues to be present, breathing among us, not on golden thrones and in magnificent but empty basilicas, but in hospital beds where invisible battles unfold, in embraces that are no more, in tears that are lost in the darkness. Perhaps the Pope revealed not a secret for the chosen few, but an eternal truth, simple and powerful, that has always been near, patiently waiting for us to open the ears of our soul and the eyes of our heart. Today, his words echo through time. Do not worship my image, accompany my cross. This phrase encapsulates the essence of what Francis wanted to convey to the world, beyond speeches and doctrines. True Christianity is not a religion of cold statues and soulless rituals, but a religion of living hearts, beating in unison with a suffering teacher. Jesus is not far from us. He is always near. He is here, in the ragged breath of a weary person, in the wounded gaze of the desperate who no longer know how to ask for help, in the silent groan of a surrendered heart. The Pope understood this not as a theological concept, but as a profound certainty on the threshold of death. Therefore, he was not afraid to depart, for he was not leaving alone. He was returning to the embrace of the one who had never left him. Are you ready to embark on this journey of return and allow yourself to be met again? Perhaps you won't remember every word of this story, but if something should remain in your heart, let it be this: Jesus does not wait for you on cold altars. He seeks you in your darkest nights, where you have lost hope. If you listen to the whisper permeating the silence, it will speak to you, not in loud revelations, but in a quiet voice, beating in rhythm with your pain. Pope Francis's revelation is not a prophecy of a distant future, but a call to the present, to you, here and now. If you felt something stir deep within your being, do not ignore it, do not suppress it, but embrace it, because it may be a sign that Jesus is calling you, whispering your name with infinite patience and love. If your heart tells you, share this story, not out of duty or habit, but for those who, in moments of silence, speak your name. If you wish to continue this journey together, subscribe, leave a comment if this story touched your life, but above all, listen. Listen carefully, for Jesus has something to say. Perhaps in that quiet whisper, you will discover the life you have always sought. See you soon.